Welcome to Rethinking Communication. I'm your host, Michael Ashford. Come with me on a journey as I explore how we better connect with each other through the power of our words. For most of us, formal education left gaps in our ability to communicate well with each other, especially when trying to navigate conflict, inspire change, and overcome misunderstandings. I'm a former journalist, a speaking coach, and a communication expert, and my goal is to encourage you to rethink what it means to be an effective communicator, from the stage to the meeting room to the living room and everywhere in between. Welcome to part 6 of my 6-part series on the communication skills you should look to improve in the age of AI. This is the final episode of this series, as you might expect, a 6-part series, and this is episode 6, right? But I hope this series has been interesting at the very least, but if not informative at the most, in terms of getting you to think about how you use AI and the ways that you can still show up as a human being with all of the weird quirks and thoughts and abilities that you have that AI simply cannot replicate, but that in the age of AI, you're going to need to lean into those things more. As AI comes for jobs, as AI comes for the decisions that we're making more and more, I want you to lean into what makes you uniquely human and your ability to communicate in so many different areas of your life. We've covered storytelling. We've covered thinking on the fly or impromptu speaking. Episode 3 or part 3 was asking questions. You know I love that. Part 4 was staying present and observant. And part 5 was pausing before you respond. Before I introduce the 6th and final episode topic here, I want to reiterate, if you would like help with your own communication skills and abilities, working on the 6 things that I've talked about in this series, or if it's something else, if it is you've recently been promoted into a job as a new leader or as a new manager, and you want help communicating with your old team that you now oversee or that you now manage, or you want help managing up to your executive team. If you are, maybe you've been a leader for a long time, but you're finding it more difficult to drive change and inspire action and overcome conflict as a new generation of employee is working its way up into the ranks, or anything in between. If you're interested on standing on a stage at a conference or giving a TEDx talk, reach out to me and let's talk about what it might look like for me to come alongside you as your communication coach. The link is in the show notes. It's michaelashford.com. That's my website with all of my coaching information. And I hope if you've given this any thought, if this series has been helpful for you, please reach out and let's just have a conversation and see if there might be a fit. All right? Now, part 6. What is it about? Well, part 6 is all about being yourself. So let's get into it. I understand if in hearing that this episode is all about the skill of being yourself, I understand if you were to say, well, is that actually a skill? And I get that. I get that skepticism. But I really think it is. I think being yourself and leaning into being yourself more in the age of AI, pushing off the pressure or the expectation to use AI in a lot of instances and instead show up as authentically yourself, I think there is a skill in saying no to that, in saying, I'm actually going to do this myself and not outsource me and my personality. And I want to give you an example of what this looks like. What do I mean by outsourcing me and myself? So often it is about context. You as the human being have the full context that even when you precede AI with information about you, or when you give it starter material, it still can't encapsulate the fullness and the richness of who you are and your ability to understand not just information and data, but feeling, emotion. It simply can't do that. One of the things that I love to say as a leader and as a communicator is that data is a fantastic compass. It is a wonderful tool to point you in the right direction. But on the other side of that data, there needs to be the human being with the feeling and the intuition and the natural context that only a human can have, that if we're keeping the compass analogy, the human is the one who's going to understand and know that there is a log that blocks the path a mile up the trail. I'm in Colorado, so I love hiking analogies, but there's a log blocking the trail a half a mile up or a mile up that you've got to navigate around. There's a creek that if you go off the trail about 10 paces to the south, there's a natural bridge so you don't have to wade across the water and get your shoes wet. Like, that's the real lived experience that a human brings into and applies to the data. The data and information's great. It's our compass. It points us where we need to go, but it's the human being that gets us to the end destination with everything else that a human being can uniquely bring to the situation. I want to give you a very recent example of how this has happened where I work. I've been in marketing leadership and an executive team member of companies big and small for 15 years now. And most recently, the company that I work for, we got acquired in early January. And as part of that acquisition, we're going through all of our different systems and saying, what are you doing? Here's what we're doing over here. How do we bring these two things together into one? And one of the things that we're talking about merging together is our paid search advertising, our Google ads. And so we have the acquired company, or the acquiring company, excuse me, that has their own way of doing things and their own instance of Google ads. And we have our way of doing things. Well, the agency that runs the Google ads for the acquiring company took a look at my Google ads instance and did a review of them. Now, I love it. It's great. We eventually have to bring these two things together. But when I got the report of the review of our Google ad instance, it was very clearly mostly AI driven. It was very clearly mostly put together by machines that just did a scrape of our information and spit out data, spit out information. And to no one's surprise, including my own, this review showed that our Google Ads instance wasn't optimized. It wasn't performing as well as it could. Data was showing that in the first half of 2025 to the back half of 2025, our effectiveness in our Google Ads went down. Now, that all is absolutely true, and the data does show that. But here's what I mean by the human being brings the context. They bring the information that the data is never going to show. Halfway through 2025, we switched Google ad agency providers. And this is pre-acquisition, this is pre-merger. We switched agency providers, and that agency provider was terrible. Flat out. They did not do a good job, and our results in paid ads tanked. They did things very differently from what had been working well in the past. They completely changed things up, and it was at the end of the year, roughly in October, when I made the decision to go back to the previous agency and try to correct all the mistakes and errors that had been made. But when you look at the data, absolutely, our Google Ads effectiveness got worse and worse and worse as the year went on. And it was only when I stepped in and said to the new agency, we're actually going to do things the way our old agency did things, and then we're going to hand things back off to them, that our ad results started getting better. And just recently, I was on a call about paid ads with my counterpart, and she was saying, I look at your ads right now and they're performing better. You all are spending less money than us, and you're getting a better return on that investment. I want that. And that is context that does not exist when AI is left to just generate a report, when AI is the outsourced brain that takes in all this information and then really important decisions are made off of it. If we went just off the data, we would go back to, or we would just merge everything into the acquiring company's Google Ads set. But that conversation that I had this last week with my counterpart on the paid ad side of the acquiring company was you all are doing things in a more effective way than we are. How do we combine these two things together to get the most out of what we're spending and your approach? That's context. That is critical thinking that does not exist when you outsource your thinking to AI. And so the entire point here is to be yourself. to resist the temptation and the urge and often the expectation just to outsource things for the sake of outsourcing things and being quote unquote more efficient, when that simply is not true if you lack the fullness and the richness of the context that only the human being can bring into a situation or into a decision, that only you can show up with all of these things. When you rely too heavily on AI, it affects your communication the most and your ability to be you, the human being with the thoughts and the common sense and the cognitive abilities that only you possess. When you leverage AI too much, you take everything that makes you uniquely you and you outsource it to something that's going to give you the most average version of you. To go back to what I said earlier, whether you feed it starter material or information about yourself or not, AI's job is to guess the next best average answer to any prompt or question that you get. It's taking the wholeness of the information that it has been given and said, based on all of this information, here's the next best average thing that I can give you. It's not going to stretch. It's not going to push past a certain set of expectations. It's not going to think of something new. It's not going to see patterns and say, well, what if we completely switched away from this pattern? And that's what I fear you lose when you outsource and leverage AI too much. You lose exactly that, the ability to show up as the human being that ultimately creates the connection communicatively that we all want and that we all desire. We know when things are written by AI. You have a sense, you can tell. People try to talk about all the ways, all the tells of AI. If it's not this, then it's that. Or the M dash. I love the M dash and I've used it ever since my journalism days. And it makes me mad that it's been hijacked by AI and seen as a sign of AI writing. I use it all the time. Go read my book. Can I ask a question? I use the M dash all over that thing. Never used a lick of AI in writing that book. When you use AI, your critical thinking abilities start to atrophy. When you use AI, you lose the ability to see patterns. You yourself. You stop using language that only you would use to describe a situation or to describe what you're seeing. Your humor, my gosh, your humor gets watered down or becomes non-existent because how could AI come up with humor? How could it find humor in the intricacies in everyday life? Your ability to relate one situation to another through metaphor and lived experience gets pushed aside for average and basic. I want to read you a phenomenal LinkedIn post that I came across this week that underscores this point. It's by Vanessa Childers. I don't know Vanessa, but her post popped up on my LinkedIn, and I have to read this to you, plus the top comment. Vanessa wrote, "I'll admit, sometimes I drop my writing into Chatty G to see if he can improve it. And he's like, I see what you're attempting there, sweetheart. And then gently exfoliates every strange, specific, inconveniently maximal thing that made it mine. And I'm like, cool. Sorry, Earth. I just used your increasingly scarce water supply to be robot mansplained about my own metaphors while voluntarily outsourcing my personality. And quite selfishly, this isn't even about water waste. Who needs it? It's about voice dilution. Like, excuse you, optimization is allergic to my personality. And please, for the love of all that is textured and specific, let me be weird. This entire problem will hereforth to be sidestepped by just not using AI. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy, I'm thirsty." And the top comment, or one of the top comments I saw, "How do I like this 360,302 times? I asked ChatGPT to improve my About Me section, and it unalived my entire personality in 4 seconds flat." That's what I'm talking about. Vanessa's post was uniquely hers. She called ChatGPT Chatty G, and it was a long run-on sentence that I even, as I was reading it here, had a hard time reading it out loud. It was kind of strange to read it out loud, but all the little details that made Vanessa's post Vanessa would have gotten stripped down and stripped away for completely average and zero personality had she relied on AI. So the skill of being yourself is to set aside that pressure. Say no to the expectation that AI will do a better job than you. There are absolutely use cases for AI, and I'm not here to get into that. I am an AI user in some ways and shapes and forms, but for the most part, I want the human being to show up and create the thing, because creating the thing, the act of creating the thing, makes the thing better. It just does. The best communicators live in the discomfort of critical thinking. And yes, critical thinking can be uncomfortable at times because it can be slow. And AI promises fast. AI promises the fastest and the most efficient way to just pump out information. Being you can be an arduous process of figuring out and metabolizing what you're seeing, feeling, sensing, hearing, thinking, all the things that AI cannot do, to metabolize that into information that can be useful and relevant to others. So be yourself. Lean into the skill of being yourself. Set aside the pressure, or don't conform to the expectation that AI can do all for you, because it simply can't. It cannot and will not ever be you. And we need more of you in the world right now. We need your ability to sit in the discomfort, to take a long time or a while to process feelings and emotions when conflict is present. We don't need an immediate answer to everything. Build your skill of being you by saying yes to you more. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Rethinking Communication. I hope it was an inspiring and valuable one for you, as I hope this entire series has been. Thanks so much for sticking with me. If you ever want to give me your thoughts, you can always email me at michael@rethinkingcommunication.com. Reach out there. I'd love to have a chat with you about this series, about the podcast, about communication in general. And as always, go to michaelashford.com if you ever want more information about my coaching, or if you want to sign up for my newsletter. It's a monthly newsletter called The Follow-Up, where I expand on different areas and topics of communication once a month. I promise. I'm not going to spam you. Thanks so much. Hope to see you in the comments or in my email inbox real soon. And even better, I hope we can connect on a call sometime to talk about how you might be able to improve your communication situation. Until next time and the next episode, keep asking questions.